Speciation. Speciation is all about the appearance of new species. So first, we have to think about what a species is. Our definition of species is a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Up here in all of these boxes, we're going to fill in different species. For example, you might be familiar with the white-tailed deer. Or another example would be your domesticated common house cat. They don't have to be animals. We also have species that would be types of bacteria or plants. Anything that is living, we can narrow down to a species. So there are 3 examples. I want you to come up with the remaining examples. So fill in each of these boxes with some species that you can think of. There is a couple of exceptions to our definition of species. So breaking news, some species can interbreed and have fertile offspring. If you think of dogs, coyotes, wolves, they are very, very similar. They actually can breed and the offspring are fertile. Some people like to think of the lion and tiger combo, which produces a liger. So the lion and tiger can interbreed, but their offspring is not fertile. So we do know that the lion and the tiger are different species because their offspring is not fertile. However, over here, dogs, coyotes, wolves, they are actually different species, although they kind of are an exception to the rule because their offspring are fertile. So how do we determine if they are actually the same species or if they are different? A common misconception is that a species is a different breed. Like you can think of the wide variety of dogs that we have, little dogs to way really, really big dogs. A breed and a species is not the same thing. A breed is all of the same species. So a dog's a dog. It doesn't matter if it's a little tiny wiener dog or if it's a very large Saint Bernard. It's still the same species. So the 3 factors that we use to differentiate species includes fossils. They need to show different forms and structure. So think bones. The second thing is with DNA analysis. And we are looking at those very key sequences of DNA. Those ones that are absolutely essential to life. And the third is the ecological role. So any lifestyle or behavioral changes. Such as becoming nocturnal would be a behavioral change. It's also important to note that there are two categories of evolution. We have macroevolution, which is macro means big, large shifts. And then we have microevolution, which is small changes. So definition of each: macroevolution is the shift in allele frequencies in the gene pool of a population that are large enough to generate a new species. And microevolution is small shifts in allele frequencies in the gene pool of a population that are not large enough to generate a new species. They are very, very similar definitions. The biggest part that determines what's macro and what's micro is that in microevolution, the shifts in allele frequency of the gene pool of a population are not large enough to generate a new species. So again, no new species is created with microevolution. Right, so there are two ways that we typically find new species are generated. One of them is known as geographical isolation, which has to do with their location. The other one is behavioral isolation, which is how the organisms interact. All right, so back to geographical. Our definition: members of the same population get separated by a geographical barrier, such as a river or a bridge or something like that. My example for this is the grasshopper. I used this in the previous lesson also. If we have a river that eventually dissects our piece of land into two sections, one side is over many years develops slightly vegetation, and then there's also a random grasshopper that just seems to have a different allele for their coloring, they have an advantage. Therefore, they are more likely to produce more offspring, which means we're going to have more and more grasshoppers that have that darker color. Eventually, it's possible that the dark green grasshopper would no longer be available to or be able to reproduce with the original colored grasshopper. So if this grasshopper and this grasshopper, they would not be able to make baby grasshoppers over, again, many years. So that is an example of geographical isolation, not to mention the fact that this grasshopper would not even physically be able to mate with that grasshopper because it's on the opposite side of the river and there's no way for it to get to the other side. The longer they are divided, the more and more different they become. Okay. The other type of isolation is behavioral isolation. And our definition here is that members of the same species inhabit the same area, but they fill different roles. So one example is that a part of the organisms become nocturnal. So they are active and looking for mates at a different part of the day than those that are awake and active during the day. So the nocturnal ones are active during the night and the daytime ones are during the day, and they never are able to intermix just because one's asleep while the other's awake. Another example is that their mating behavior has changed just enough so that it's not recognizable. So that is the example I'm using here with the blue-footed booby, which is a type of bird. I did not make that up. So they have a very specific mating behavior that attracts the optimal mate. So these guys do a dance. However, there are some other birds that have a very specific song that they sing. The eastern meadowlark versus the western meadowlark have different songs that they sing to attract a mate. The meadowlarks are very similar in appearance, but they sing different songs to attract their mate. Crickets also have a very specific song that they sing to attract a mate, and if you're not part of that species, then that song does not appeal to you, I guess, if you're a cricket. So the blue-footed booby is a bird that's found in Central and South America. And I'm trying to be apparently super high tech and put the video in here and the link. And I think you should be able to click the link and it will take you there. Or if you tap the picture and then go to edit clip, I think it will allow you to go to that link and then you can play it right there.
San Pedro Martir is the most remote.
Okay, so watch that. It's 3 minutes long. If neither of those options work, I also linked the video in the assignment.
San Pedro Martir is the most remote.
In one of those places, this video will work for you. So watch the video, and then down here, I want you to describe or draw. You can just use words if you want, or you can copy and paste my bird up there. Describe the impact that their mating dance has on their reproduction. So yeah, do that there. That is something for you to do after you watch the video. And that is going to tell you all about how their mating behavior can cause them to be behaviorally isolated, which then leads to speciation. All right, again, over time, groups of organisms that do not interbreed tend to become more and more different. So, the last thing, all forms of reproductive isolation involve separation, so they are no longer together, and divergence, which means they get farther and farther apart genetically. Over time, groups get more and more different, which eventually leads to a new species, which is the process of speciation.